Hello, everyone, and welcome to Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. Joining us tonight are three fabulous authors, both who write both poetry and fiction, and they are here to share their work from their books with us. So tonight we have Anna B. Moore, John writes both poetry and John Bateman, and Daniel DeMarco. So, welcome, the three of you, and thank you for joining our show. And thank you to everyone who is watching for joining us this evening. So, we go in alphabetical order. So, tonight we're going to start with Mr. Bateman. John, would you like to tell us a little bit about your work and what you're going to be reading for us this evening?
Sure, thank you. I'm John Bateman. I have written for quite some time. I've done some journalism, some short film. My novel, Who Killed Buster Sparkle, came out from Unsolicited Press 5 years ago. It's about a ghost and a drag queen in Mississippi. And tonight I'm actually going to be reading from a documentary poem that just got published in Ponder Review, which is the literary magazine at the Mississippi University for Women. Should I just go ahead and start?
Sure.
Cycle count. Fuck pretty poetry. I sat to write a poem. I came to read that poem. I feel no thing but the anesthetic strangulation of sanity. The following is an inventory of events taken from police records. Murder victims never get trigger warnings. The following is an inventory of legislation passed in various states. My ticking is not working. The following is an inventory of legislation passed in various states. This occurred in a land named United. This occurred in a land known as We the People. The following is an inventory. March 22nd, 2023, Georgia. Georgia bans all medical care done for transition purposes for minors. July 8th, 2022, Mississippi, 5:17 a.m. Jay Lee responds to Timothy Harrington on Snapchat. Now you're just trying to get me over to beat my ass or something. March 21st, 2023, Arkansas. Arkansas restricts the use of restrooms and sleeping quarters in schools for the exclusive use by the male sex or for the exclusive use by the female sex, defined as the physical condition of being male or female based on genetics and physiology as listed on the original birth certificate. July 8th, 2022, Mississippi, 5:54 a.m. Snapchat message. Lee is heading to Harrington's apartment. March 16th, 2023, Arkansas. Arkansas bans all medical care done for transition purposes for minors unless two independent healthcare providers have documentation that a minor's perception of their own gender does not align with their gender assigned at birth for 2 years. July 8th, 2022, Mississippi, 5:56 a.m. Harrington Googles, how long does it take to strangle someone? March 14th, 2023, Arkansas. Arkansas states that the Department of Education should review policies, materials, and communications that would promote the teaching and learning of ideologies such as critical race theory, which the state contends is at odds with equal protection under the law. Prohibits public school teachers from teaching about gender identity or sexual orientation to students before grade 5. July 8th, 2022, Mississippi, 5:58 a.m. Lee's last location identified at 5:58 a.m. March 11, 2023, West Virginia. Bans all medical care done for transition purposes for minors. July 8, 2022, Mississippi, 6:49 a.m. Harrington purchases a roll of duct tape after seen looking at large rolling garbage cans. March 3, 2023, West Virginia. Establishes an equal protection for religion and religious conduct, allowing people to discriminate against queer people under religious grounds. July 8, 2022, Mississippi, 7:25 a.m. Lee's car seen pulling into Molly Bar Trail Apartments. It is later found here. March 2nd, 2023, Tennessee. Bans all medical care done for transition purposes for minors. July 8, 2022, Mississippi, 7:34 a.m. A jogger wearing a gray hoodie is seen on camera running from the apartment complex who flags down a white Kia to get a ride. Oxford police pull over the Kia 2 minutes later for speeding. Harrington later identified it as the passenger wearing a gray hoodie. March 2nd, 2023, Tennessee. Bans any adult cabaret performances on public property or in any location where the performance could be viewed by a child. This includes drag performers. July 8, 2022, Mississippi, 10:45 a.m. Harrington, who co-owns a small moving company, picks up a company box truck and drives to his parents' house in Grenada. The security camera shows Harrington loading a long-handled shovel and a wheelbarrow into the truck and leaving. March 1st, 2023, Wyoming. Requires school to classify all of their sports as being for males, men or boys, females, women or girls, or co-ed or mixed. It bans students whose biological sex is male from participating in sports teams designated for females. Biological sex is determined at birth in an unchanged birth certificate. July 8, 2022, Mississippi, 8:30 p.m. University of Mississippi Police Department receive a call from Stephanie Lee, Lee's mother, requesting a wellness check because her son's location isn't showing up on her iPhone. February 28, 2023, Mississippi, called the Regulate Experimental Adolescent Procedures Act, bans all medical care done for transition purposes for minors. July 8, 2022, Mississippi, 8:45 p.m. An officer checks on Lee's apartment at Campus Walk, a university-owned student housing complex. The door is slightly ajar and Lee's dog is inside. March 27, 2023, Arkansas categorizes any venue that hosts drag performances as an adult-oriented business. Therefore, any regulations concerning adult-oriented businesses also apply to venues hosting drag performances. July 10, 2022, Mississippi. Oxford Police Department receive a call from one of Lee's friends who says they talked over Snapchat early in the morning on July 8th. This person tells the police that Lee was on the way to meet someone he had previously hooked up with. February 13th, 2023, South Dakota bans all medical care done for transition purposes for minors. July 21st, 2022, Mississippi. Oxford Police Department receives Lee's Snapchat data, including his messages and blocked contacts, and identifies Harrington as a person of interest. This corroborates the tip given to the police department on July 10th. February 9th, 2023, Utah prohibits schools from affirming a student's gender that is different from the student's biological sex without written parent permission. July 22nd, 2022, Mississippi. During police questioning, Harrington admits to a relationship with Lee and having an argument on the morning of July 8th. January 27th, 2023, Utah. Bans all medical care done for transition purposes for minors. July 22nd, 2022, Mississippi. Timothy Harrington is arrested. September 29, 2022, Oklahoma specifies that funds devoted to expanding behavioral health for children cannot be given to facilities that provide medical care to minors for transition purposes. July 22, 2022, Mississippi. In a search of Harrington's apartment, a cadaver dog from the DeSoto County Sheriff's Department reportedly alerts 4 times to the smell of decaying flesh, 3 times in the bedroom and once in the kitchen living room area. July 15, 2022, South Carolina carves out allowances for discrimination based on sincerely held religious beliefs or moral convictions. July 27, 2022, Mississippi. The police receive a forensic copy of Harrington's MacBook that shows his Google search history. May 25, 2022, Louisiana requires schools to classify all other sports as being for males, men or boys, females, women or girls, or co-ed or mixed. It bans athletes whose biological sex is male from participating in female, women, or girls sports. Biological sex is to be defined by the student's official birth certificate issued at the near the date of birth. August 9, 2022, Mississippi, Lafayette County Circuit Court Judge orders Harrington held without bond. May 17, 2022, Oklahoma prohibits classroom discussions about sexual orientation or gender identity in primary grades or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. August 16, 2022, Mississippi. Jay Lee's body is still missing. May 16, 2022, South Carolina requires schools to classify all of their sports reading for males, men, or boys, females, women, or girls, or co-ed or mixed. December 1st, 2022, Mississippi. Jay Lee's body is still missing. May 4th, 2022, Arizona expands parental authority over their child by requiring that all medical records and all school records must be made available to the parents or legal guardian of a minor. Schools must gain written permission from parents or legal guardians before teaching students about sex, sexuality, or gender. December 1st, 2022, Mississippi. Harrington released on a $250,000 bond. May 2nd, 2022, Tennessee. Tennessee withholds funding from schools that do not separate students on the basis of biological sex for school sports. It does not clarify how this is to be defined. February 22nd, 2023, Mississippi. Harrington did not appear for arraignment. May 2nd, 2022, Tennessee bans students whose biological sex is male from participating in female, women, or girls' sports. According to this bill, biological sex is to be defined by the student's birth certificate as long as that birth certificate was filed at or near the date of birth. March 24th, 2023, Mississippi. Jay Lee's body is still missing. It has been 259 days. April 26, 2022, Oklahoma prevents birth certificates from having any sex or gender designation other than male or female. A non-binary or X designation is not allowed. May 29, 2023, Mississippi. Grand jury indicts Harrington for capital murder in the disappearance of Jay Lee. May 29, 2023, Mississippi. Jay Lee's body is still missing. It has been 264 days. May 4th, 2023, Mississippi. It has been 300 days. July 8th, 2023, 365 days. July 8th, 2024, Mississippi, 731 days. America, this inventory is incomplete. Jay Lee's body is still missing. Bleed so I can hear you. Fuck pretty poetry. Thank you.
Very powerful, powerful poetry, and not pretty poetry. Daniel, who's written 2 novels, is going to be reading from his latest one called A Devil on My Trail. Daniel, would you like to tell us a little bit about your latest work and also what you'll read from it?
Yeah, not a problem. So this is, I just got this actually like yesterday. I came home from a long weekend, and this was like the sample copy that, wait, where's my camera? So this is like the first real one I've held, so it's pretty exciting. Devil on My Trail. Artwork by Bo Kegler. He did a great job. No blurbs. I have them, but sample copy. Anyway, so this is coming out on December 10th. I won't read from this. I learned from my first book that as I got older, that reading the small print is not great publicly. So got to print it out.
I understand
that. This follows a young musician who accidentally plays a secret chord that summons the devil. And now him and his friends, including Keith Richards' ghost, get thrust on a quest to collect magical artifacts from rock and roll history to prepare for a showdown with the devil. So I'm going to give you just the very first chapter, super short. It's when he plays that chord. Present, Kung Fu Necktie, Philadelphia. I found the simple life ain't so simple. My hand slipped when Mary or Margaret or whatever her name was winked at me. I was on stage finishing the final song of my band set when I played the secret chord. The same one Jimi Hendrix knew. The same one Robert Johnson found. The one Keith Richards' ghost showed me years ago. I swore I'd never play it, but since he showed me, it was always lying there, a sore tooth waiting to be tongued. Nothing happened just then. It didn't work that way from the little I understood. Lots of guys play the secret chord by mistake without knowing it. But I knew it. Desire lay in my heart, and that's all that mattered. A force surged through me, a bell tolling once. Something bad was going to happen. The audience cheered, and the hot smell of bourbon and cigarettes hit my nose. The rattle of chains. Keith Richards was beside me. Jesus Christ, I said. Not by a long shot, Keith said. I told you not to play the bloody thing. I waved to the audience, thanked them. They wanted an encore. I turned my head to Keith. Why'd you show me the fucker to begin with? I whispered. Keith shrugged. It's called a momentary lapse of reason. He reached over and twisted my guitar's G-string back in tune. My drummer clicked off our encore number. Keith snapped his fingers and did a jig off to the side of the stage. Then he disappeared. He's been doing that ever since I was 14. All right, so we're going to go back 8 years to when Mark, our narrator, is 14, and he meets Keith Richards' ghost for the first time. Mark sat on the edge of his bed with a beat up, forgot the title chapter, chapter 2, 8 years ago. Awake, shake dreams from your hair. Mark sat on the edge of his bed with a beat up guitar, a student model Fender Stratocaster his uncle gave him for his 13th birthday last year, the same week his parents died. Mark played the shit out of that guitar. The frets were worn down and the top 2 strings buzzed past the 9th fret. The volume knob had long disappeared and the guitar barely kept in tune. He ran some scales to warm up, but quickly got bored and started riffing on a blues lick his teacher showed him. The strings were dirty and dead, muted steel fighting for a sustain. He cranked the amp to compensate and began playing Start Me Up. A string broke mid-riff and he got on his knees and pressed the guitar into the face of his amplifier, creating a loop of feedback a la Kurt Cobain. Mark! His aunt yelled up the stairs, but she might as well have been screaming into a vacuum. His door burst open. Mark! His aunt in her bathrobe, bags under her eyes, stood in the doorway. He stopped. The guitar squawked a death screech as he turned the amp off. It's 8:30 in the fucking morning. What's the matter with you? Mark shrugged and set down his guitar. It wasn't that loud, he mumbled. We talked about this. No guitar before 11 on the weekends. Sorry, he mumbled. His aunt left the room, slamming the door. She wasn't a bad person, but Mark could never shake the feeling that he was a guest in her house. Mark grabbed his phone and earbuds off his dresser and flopped down on his bed. He put on Exile on Main Street and looked at the poster of the Rolling Stones at Altamont his uncle gave him with the guitar. He closed his eyes and rocked his head as Rip This Joint started. The up-tempo blues number catapulted itself into his ears, piano jangling along the galloping guitar, Jagger's vocals tearing the seam off the top. That one'll keep you on your toes, a voice said, creeping under the earbuds from somewhere outside. Mark bolted upright, his headphones yanked out of his ears, money flying through the air like feathers, the contents of the box spilling to the ground. I always mess that up when I read this part. I skip a part. He has a little box full of all of his things, his money, his little trinkets, notes from girls that he likes, things like that, like a kid. Went everywhere. He looked around the room. Over here, Sonny, the voice said again. Mark turned around and Keith Richards was lying on his bed, just beside him. Mark jumped up and crashed into his dresser. What the shit? What? Shit, Mark gasped. He peed his pants, just the tiniest bit. Keith Richards lit a cigarette and tucked the lighter away in his pocket. It's all right, Keith said. It's all right. His voice was charcoal, vocal cords vibrating against each other like dried-out chains in a smokehouse. What? How? Mark managed again. What? Relax, Keith said, and sat up and swung his legs over the other side of the bed. He stood up and went over to Mark's guitar. He picked it up, examined it. This won't do, eh? He looked at Mark. He flicked his cigarette and the ashes fell to the carpet. And then he put the cigarette between his teeth. Keith played a lick on the guitar. She did the job, though. He held the guitar out to Mark. Show me what you got, kid. Mark fainted. All right. So there's Mark. He has summoned the devil. We know that he just met Keith Richards' ghost, and now we're back into the quest. And I'm going to read from my last little section here, probably the grossest thing I've ever written. And I'm sorry, you have to listen to it because you're here. All right, so he's battling the devil. It's midnight. He's just had his 3 matches. I'm not going to tell you what won, who won, what was that all about. But this is after the fact. He's with his buddies, and Papa Legba is there as well. He's like an intermediary for the devil. These tricky motherfuckers, Bollock said. He shook his head. This is dude's car, right? Yeah. Cool, Bollock said and hopped up on the trunk. Maybelline, I wouldn't watch this. In fact, please don't. I don't want to get stage fright. Bollocks was unbuttoning his pants. Tanner, tell Alexa to play Sludge Factory by Alice in Chains. What are you going to do? Maybelline asked. I'm lactose intolerant. I just had 3 milkshakes. I'm doing the only thing I know how to right now. He looked at Keith. I'd move if I were you. Oh, God, Maybelline said and turned around. What are you doing? Tanner said. I'm going to Philly tailgate this son of a bitch, Bollock said. What's a Philly tailgate? Tanner asked, holding up his phone, letting the first chords of the song blare out. So you take a shit in the flatbed of a pickup truck, Maybelline said. Or, Mark added, on the trunk of a car of a deserving individual. Or, Bollocks yelled down, he grunted, in the back seat of a convertible. A sound like wet noodles being dumped on marble flooring came from the car. Tanner looked over Mark's shoulder towards Bollocks. Oh, no. He gagged and turned around. Yo, can someone get me some napkins or something, Bollocks said. Mark ran to the van and grabbed a roll of paper towels and tossed them up to Bollocks. Mark jumped on the back of the trunk. He undid his zipper. What are you doing? Bollocks asked, pulling up his pants. Wouldn't be a true Philly tailgate without the whiz. A torrent of piss streamed down onto the leather back seat, slick with excrement. That's that scene. I am a serious writer. I do want you to understand that. But I take my dick and fart jokes quite seriously. So, thank you.
Thank you for reading. And now we're going to head over to Anna. Anna, would you like to share with us your book and what you will be reading?
Sure. This is the 4th or 5th chapter in my first novel, which is going to be published by Unsolicited Press on September 10th. What I think the chapter itself will kind of tell you what the whole thing is about. But what you need to know before I read it is that the novel is set in the 1980s, and that seems to be a decade that I am obsessed with. Myra, the protagonist, is 16 years old, and she is in an adolescent rehab, alcohol and drug hospital inpatient. And she has a disorder where she pulls out her hair. It's called trichotillomania. So that's really all you need to know. This chapter is called Spins. In 6th grade, Myra and her friend had shared a can of beer. She hadn't even gotten drunk. So you were drinking in 6th grade? Asked Lisa with the straight bangs, drug of choice heroin. She was only 14. We stole it from their fridge, Myra said. She was the focus of small group that morning to give her tell-all. This was what every patient did on day 9. Why didn't you drink more? Asked Teresa with the freckly arms, drug of choice pot. Teresa was a tough girl from Mount Pleasant. She wore fog hat and Leonard Skinner t-shirts, inside out since music shirts weren't allowed, and had a wide smile. She was 17, she'd been in rehab twice before, and if she didn't stay sober this time, they'd put her in a lockup. I don't remember. Oh, bullshit. You didn't drink more your first time trying beer? I don't think so. You're lying, said Teresa. Takes a liar to know one, and I know you're lying. I'm not lying. Myra looked at Rachel, who said nothing as usual, her gaze centered on the middle of their circle as Myra spoke. Behind Rachel was her desk and a wall with 2 windows that looked into the building next door, another part of the hospital. The blinds in that building were always shut. Myra wasn't lying. What else could she say? Maybe her mom came in and caught us. Maybe that's why we stopped. Uh-huh. We thought it tasted gross, like water or something. But you kept drinking until you were caught? We didn't get caught. So you chose to stop. Rachel finally said something. I guess so. The second time was in 8th grade. Orange wine coolers with a handful of friends. They stuffed some bottles into their jackets and walked to the Sycamore Mall to see the movie Night of the Comet. And yes, Myra had been drunk. They sat in the very back row. Halfway through, when Kelly Maroney was in the department store dancing to Living on the Edge and trying on all the clothes she had ever wanted because everyone else in the world had died, Myra dropped an empty bottle on the floor. It clinked loud against the cement and rolled down to the middle of the theater, and they were all covering their mouths, laughing and trying to be quiet. Myra was terrified of getting caught and kicked out, but the terror was almost amusing, more intangible than terror had ever felt, because her drunkenness kept the terror at a distance, at the edge of haze and uplift. But Myra was still aware of her skin, the sweat that began to spread, the undercurrent of worry, and she pulled on her friend Cindy's arm and made her leave. They walked back home and got headaches, and Cindy puked and went to sleep. What about drugs? I haven't done any. Bullshit, said Teresa. I haven't, ever. Rachel, isn't your bullshit radar going off? We know when people are lying, said Teresa. She pointed to Rachel, especially them. They always know. I'm not lying. The first time Myra got in trouble for drinking, the night everything changed, was the night she first hung out with Nancy. It was the summer before Myra's junior year. She had been at a party in someone's driveway, a high school party with boys and girls standing around by a keg and more kids arriving every second, filling up space in the carport. Myra arrived with Cindy, still her friend then, but Cindy had gone inside to find the bathroom, and that's when Nancy had come up to Myra. Drink beer with me. Nancy always wore her black leather jacket and tight Levi's and black boots, her short hair dyed to match. She did drugs and she was a dropout, according to everyone, but Myra often saw her in the hallways, her tiny purse atop the stack of books she held against her chest. They had had a conversation once in the girls' room on the 2nd floor of City High, and Nancy had offered Myra her lip gloss. Nancy grabbed Myra's hand and pulled her toward the keg, and Myra realized that she would follow Nancy anywhere. She was so cool and easy and confident, with such clear skin and a perfect chin and a smooth voice. Cooper and me broke up. Nancy grabbed a cup and filled it, handed it to Myra, and got one for herself. You did? Led Zeppelin boomed from inside the house. Boys sitting on the stairs leading into the kitchen were smoking cigarettes. Want one? Said Nancy. She held one out. Myra had never smoked a cigarette and had never wanted to. She took it. He cheated on me. No way, said Myra. Everyone knew Cooper, Nancy's boyfriend, already graduated. He dropped her off at City High every morning in the parking lot by the auditorium and then waited there at the end of the day to pick her up, motorcycle engine running. Trinity Taylor, slut, Nancy said, lighting her cigarette. She reached over to light Myra's, but someone bumped into her and Myra dropped it. Here, sweetie. Nancy pulled the cigarette from her own mouth and handed it to Myra. I've got plenty. It got packed and loud, and there were 8th graders running around in the backyard and a black dog on a chain barking and barking. Myra might have had 2 beers, and she was drinking a third when, 2 beers? That's it? Said Teresa. Now I don't believe you either, said Jen. You're minimizing. Yep, said Tina with the off-center eyes, drug of choice cocaine. Her neighbor had raped her for 3 years, from age 7 to 10. She was on day 45 and didn't speak often and had large spaces between her teeth. I had 2, I think. I don't remember. Then you had a lot more than that. It was almost a year ago, Myra said. I don't remember. Did she? Maybe it was more than 2 after all. She was drunk by then, a little bit, just enough to see everything around her as warmth, as welcoming. Then they heard the motorcycle. That asshole, Nancy yelled. I can't believe he came here. She grabbed Myra's hand and pulled her through the backyard and into the woodsy end of the cul-de-sac, Myra following her through the trees that she could not name, and then into the street on the other side of the block. They started walking, Nancy's boots clicking on the concrete and her hair frizzing beneath the street lamps, Myra's Kmart shoes padding quietly alongside. Next to Nancy, Myra saw herself, hair straight and feathered stiff on the sides, white skin with ruddy cheeks, green and pink and white plaid shirt, jean shorts, woven loop belt. She felt minuscule, underrepresented, styleless, and without form. Did Nancy think of Myra as a friend? She felt flattered and tried to fight it, to talk herself out of feeling flattered by the attention of someone she found interesting or gorgeous or smart or lovely, because if she ever felt too secure in love and attention, they would turn to nothingness before she even knew they were gone, like stars disappearing as night turned to day. They stopped and sat on the curb. Nancy stuck her feet into the street and crossed her legs, toes of her boots pointing to the sky. The houses all around them were void of lights and sound, the street scrubbed clean, fireflies blinking above mowed lawns. I'm tired, said Nancy. Myra sat down and hugged her knees, resting her chin in the dip between them. As if from God came a Trans Am from around the corner, a pair of thick white stripes down each side. 2 boys got out. Dave! Oh my God, Dave! Nancy jumped up and hugged him. He hugged her back. Myra knew who Dave was because everyone did, a thick, cute champion wrestler who had just graduated. He'd been homecoming king. The other one was Mark, a senior, a football player with blue eyes and a slight underbite. They were both tall, really tall, and popular and cute, and Myra wanted to cover herself. Why was she so afraid? She had always been afraid, even though her head was full of conversations she wanted to have and images of the way she wanted to present herself, to appear, to seem to other people. And what was she afraid of? She'd understood it when Judy, the counselor she'd seen when she was 14, had told her she was afraid of rejection and abandonment because her mother had died. But Myra also understood how illogical this fear was when Judy tried to make her fear go away. So what if someone doesn't like you? She asked. What does it mean if someone doesn't like you? And Myra offered answers that were stupid, that made no sense when you said them out loud or wrote them down. That I am unlikable, that I am ugly, that I am alone and no one will be my friend, that I will never know love or be loved. She knew those answers were not true, that when you saw them written on paper or said them out loud, you could see how wrong they were. Myra knew her views were distorted, but still, they did not go away. Myra told small group none of her reflections, and they weren't asking why about much of anything other than what she did and whether she drank or not. Nancy put her head on Dave's shoulder. He fucking cheated, Dave. She put her arms around his neck. He cheated. I know. He's sorry, though. He's looking for you. I'm Mark, Mark said to Myra. Hi, I'm Myra. She pretended to be confident, as if boys like Mark said hi to her every day, as if they were blips. I know, he said, smiling, that tiny underbite disappearing into his dimples. Want a beer? We have some in the back seat. You know, asked Myra, still looking at Mark, who was looking at her. I've seen you around. Something in Myra's belly fluttered like a bird. She thought it might be her entire stomach, but she didn't know how large stomachs were or even where they were. Wasn't the stomach higher up the body, closer to the heart than the hips? This anatomy would make sense since Myra felt what she thought was a tornado swirling inside her, her anticipation so intense that it made her gasp and then laugh. She smiled and felt the power of it for the first time. Mark gazed at her. Myra gazed back, stunned by her own confidence. Her curfew was midnight. Call your mom, said Nancy. You mean my dad, said Myra. Let's go to the payphone at 7-Eleven so Myra can call her mom and say she's staying at my house. Nancy was sitting in the back seat with Dave. They wanted to go to Court Hill Park, a few blocks away. How many beers have you drank? Asked Jen. 2, I think, Myra said. What a minimizer, said Teresa. She crossed her arms like Rachel. I really don't remember, said Myra. Did she? She remembered standing under the light above the payphone outside of the 7-Eleven, the parking lot empty, the streets quiet. Nancy stood beside her, telling her what to say, and Myra kept telling Nancy to shh. She remembered her father asking questions in a sleepy voice and being aware that her call had woken him up, and she remembered getting annoyed that he wouldn't let her get off the phone because Mark was waiting in the car, and she had to go with him tonight because there would never be another moment in time like this one, where she could be with Mark and see if he actually liked her. She would not let this opportunity disappear. And why did these moments of potential security and love and desire always have to be moments, flickers? Why couldn't a moment last longer than a minute? Why not hours, days? Why couldn't her life be full of security and contentment all the time? What was so wrong with a desire for such an existence? Myra sighed hard into the receiver, waved her hand in front of her nose to disperse the gnats, and told her father she would see him in the morning. Then she hung up. If she's home, my mom will cover for you, said Nancy. Let's go. Mark drove them all to Court Hill. They got the beer out of the car. Myra and Mark took the shelter by the Weeping Willow, and Nancy and Dave took the shelter across the footbridge on the other side of the creek that Myra did not know the name of. Myra and Mark kissed on the bench for hours, mouths opening and closing. His lips were soft like the moonlight. He told her she was pretty, that she had a beautiful smile. He stroked her hair. The palms of his hands on her nipples and the gentle pressure of his fingers when he squeezed made her feel soft, sweet, beautiful, grown up. She felt sexual and sensual, but didn't know those words, what they meant if they emerged from inside you without the timbre of vocabulary, the shape of meaning. Between long stretches of making out, they talked about school starting soon, about how much he loved football. He was on varsity, first string. How maybe they could have a great rest of summer together before his practices started. What are you doing over there? Dave called. Nancy laughed. Mark didn't answer. He pulled Myra gently against his chest and wrapped his arm around her. He rubbed one of her shoulders. Myra became aware that she could see the weeping willow, that the night had begun to fade, that this extensive string of moments was ending. When Dave and Nancy walked over, no one knew what time it was. The shingled rooftops of one-story homes all around them were visible against the gray sky. No breeze blew. The neighborhood was as quiet and still as it had been the night before when Mark and Dave found them on the curb. Myra had never been so thirsty, and she had to get home before her father woke up. And if he was awake, he couldn't possibly see Myra being dropped off by two boys. Nancy asked Myra if she had any money for a taxi. Because they can take me home, Nancy said. My mom won't care, but I bet yours will. Could you take me close to my house? Myra said. They were getting into Mark's Trans Am. Dave leaned down to the open window on the driver's side to Mark, who was starting the car. I'll walk, man. He looked back at Nancy. Call Cooper. I bet he's worried about you. Ha, no way. She put her feet up on the seat and looked out the window. I bet he's waiting for you at your house. Who cares? Nancy did not look at any of them. The pink shirt beneath her leather jacket had a spot of beer just below the collar. Mark drove Nancy to her house, a duplex out by the Sycamore Mall, a duplex with no cars in the driveway and nothing in the front yard except a German Shepherd on a chain and a doghouse. The dog did not move or open its eyes, as if it were drugged, exhausted, ill, indifferent. Myra got out of the front seat and flipped it forward for Nancy. No large trees out here. The sun was blinding. Bye, said Myra. Why wasn't Nancy talking, even looking at her anymore? Bye, Nancy said. She bent down and petted the dog. Hey, Butch, sweetie. Hey there. She sat on the concrete stoop. On their way to Myra's house, Mark held her hand, and Myra sat between the seats, right next to him, their hips touching. Mark asked if he could call her. She said yes. He dropped her off a block from her house. So how much did you drink that night, Myra? Rachel asked. I don't know. All the girls stared at her. Teresa rolled her eyes. So did Stephanie with the blue mascara, drug of choice alcohol. Maybe 6, Myra said. 6 beers. Rachel nodded and leaned forward. Her front teeth were yellowish. Do you know how much that is? Myra shook her head. How many times have you been drunk in your life? I don't know. Weekends mostly? Myra nodded. Rachel had perfect fingernails, pale pink polish filed to dull squares instead of round tips. Both nights? Not really, sometimes. How many times when you were on Ellaville? Myra scratched dried aquanet from one of her barrettes, a slender brown metal strip above her left ear, shrugged, felt her face turn angry. She asked you a question, said Tina. I don't know. I bet you don't, said Rachel. The 2 lights on the desk phone blinked red, little bubbles below the squares of buttons. If you're being honest, Rachel said, that's easily over 60 times that you've been drunk. Myra stared at her shoes, picked at her barrette again. Tina crossed her legs. Do you know how many times I've been drunk, Myra? Myra shook her head. I'm not chemically dependent, Rachel said. I'm one of the only counselors here who isn't. I am a food addict and a codependent, but I've never been interested in alcohol. I'm a social drinker, a moderate drinker, a normal drinker. Myra stared. I've been drunk 5 times in my entire life. And once I realized I was drunk, I stopped every time. This is what social drinkers do. Do you think you're a normal social drinker? Myra's legs and head hurt like they had that morning as she headed toward her house, but what it ached the most were her cheeks from smiling all night long. She never felt physical pain from elation before. She opened and closed her mouth and turned her head to stretch her neck and saw Millicent, their neighbor across the alley, sitting on her front porch, staring strangely at Myra. "Have you called home?" Millicent asked. "Your dad's been looking for you." Millicent glared, and Myra saw herself, standing on the sidewalk, recently felt up, clothes askew and hair matted out of its sprayed hold, her legs smudged with dirt in a few places and pocked with mosquito bites. "You might want to give him a call." Millicent went inside her house and slammed her front door. "Myra!" Her father was running to her, wearing the brown bathrobe and slippers he had worn all of Myra's life. He was a big man, and when he wore his robe, his arms looked huge. He held them out in the morning light, and before Myra could move, they were around her, not letting her go. Myra wanted to run, to go back to Mark, back to the park and the softness. Her father smelled like cigarettes and sweat. He pushed her away and held her by her shoulders and looked at her. His baldness had progressed nearly to his ears, the dark gray hair that grew from the back of his head hanging loose, the gel he always combed in no longer holding. His skin wrinkled like leather around his eyes, large and blue, so different from Myra's. Thin glasses slipped down to his nose as he spoke. The street seemed endless behind him, stretching down into the city. "I've been up all night. I called the police." "So you lied to him," said Jen. Myra nodded. "Where were you?" He yelled this time, furious. His eyes glistened with exhaustion, but he still wasn't letting her go. He kept his hands on her shoulders as if they were nailed in place. "Do you know what that did to your dad?" asked Rachel. "Myra, have you thought about what that did to your dad?" Myra shook her head. "Have you thought about what your behavior and your choices have done to your father, Myra?" "He doesn't care," Myra didn't say. "I'm not even on his radar." Myra opened her mouth to speak and became aware that she could not. Rachel held up her palms. Time for Myra to have a think. For the next 3 minutes, Myra is going to think about what her behavior might have done to her father. So nobody speak, please. She looked at Myra. Picture him, that morning, or the morning the cop brought you home from the country, or the night you tried to kill yourself, or any number of nights I'm sure you haven't told us anything about. Myra bit her lip and reached up to scrape off more Aquanet. Rachel held up her palm again. "Do not touch your hair. Keep your hands away from it. Don't ever let me see you touch your hair. Sit there and leave your hands in your lap. Do not move." Myra would not cry. She would bite a hole in her lip before she would let herself. Then she felt a tear on her cheek, then another. "Let them drip. You don't get to wipe them away." Myra sniffled. She felt like the architect of everything built wrong, one structure after another, beams collapsing and deteriorating beneath her, over her head, all the way out into an invisible, distant place in the earth. Thank you.
Wow. We had 3 inspiring readings today. So I'm going to start with John. John, that was an amazing poem that you read. Not a pretty poem. Where did you get the idea to interweave the characters that you, or I don't know, are they real characters or are they fictional characters? Lee and Harrington in with the legislative and the laws that are unfortunately happening across the land. It implies that there was some kind of a relationship between the laws and the characters.
So it is a documentary poem, and those were pieces of evidence taken from published news accounts from police records. So it is an ongoing issue. Jay Lee's body is still missing. The trial was originally set for this fall, but it's been anyway. So yes, it's unfortunately it's a real set of circumstances, and the relationship between the laws is during this time period that Jay Lee disappeared. a lot of laws across the country were being passed, and some were very specific, but taken collectively, it just represents a collection of lack of understanding and hate towards the LGBTQ community at large. And so as far as a relationship between the laws, to me, the disappearance of Jay Lee and the rightfully assumed violence that has happened. I mean, everybody believes he's been murdered. There is no body, but it's pretty clear that he suffered some violent end. That it's not a one-off. Like, it's unfortunate that this still happens, and it particularly impacts a lot of the queer Black community and the queer Latino community, Latinx community. And so that's the relationship. And you asked me, the question was, where did I get the idea? And I have been writing a lot of journalism lately, and I don't know where I got the idea. It was written in response to a prompt for a pendulum. And I started thinking of a clock, and I started thinking of the progression of time. And then I started thinking about how the progression of laws can make us feel like we're going backwards in time. And so that's where the idea of the interweaving the two came together. And when you see it in print, it's formatted as an inventory, like a business inventory. It's in a spreadsheet format.
So when it's in print, we cannot hear the clicking of the clock. So are those clock sounds interspersed? I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, was that something that you did for performance, or is it written into the poem in an an Ezra kind of way where it's tick tick or tick tock?
No, it's not written into the poem. Not as a tick tick. No, the lines of the poem are numbered. No, every time I've performed it, I've played the ticking. There's an urgency there.
And that makes it even more prescient. Yes, exactly. Well, it's a very powerful poem. And where, again, can people read that poem if they want to read it?
So it's been published
Where was it published?
The Ponder Review, which is the literary magazine for the Mississippi University for Women. It's in print now. It will be available online. They do 2 issues a year, and I think it goes online when the winter issue is published. So it'll be in print for 6 months, and then it goes online at the Ponder Review.
Well, for someone that's only published twice a year, almost, congratulations.
I just wanted to say I was really struck because, I mean, it's so, your poem, it so emphasizes the relationship between the passing of these laws and the increasing danger. The more laws are passed, the more danger the LGBTQ plus community is in. And that's so, it's so horrible and uncoincidental. And I really, I was really moved by the way your poem kind of showed us that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The urgency is there. So Daniel, where did you get the idea for the secret chord? As soon as you said that, I thought of Leonard Cohen's secret chord, Hallelujah. And do you have a robust musical background? Are you also a musician that you're able to write about music in such a confident way?
Yeah, you were cutting in and out, but I think I can answer your questions. Yes, the secret chord. I'm a big Leonard Cohen fan. Love him. So I guess that's always been rattling around. I just remember sitting down and just writing just like the first line, like my hand slipped when Mary or Margaret or Mary or whatever winked at me. And then it just kind of just came out. It was probably just floating around. I played the secret chord. I just thought that was like kind of funny, because in the Leonard Cohen song, it's supposed to please the Lord, but in this, total opposite. It summons the devil. So he's got his own secret chord, which I thought was kind of fun. So yes, I've been playing music my entire life. Musician, writer. I was like 6 years old, and those things just said, "This is what you were going to do." And I'm a music, I'm a music and writing teacher. An English teacher, high school. Um, so yeah, I've been playing my whole life. Love music. Been in lots of bands of no to very moderate success, extremely moderate, and it's just fun to write about. It's like act two as a failed stage musician. So.
Well, maybe you're I don't think anyone is a failed musician. I think if you could do it, you could do it, and that's a gift, regardless of what level you're at. You know, yeah. I admire music and I torture a piano, but I have no talent for it.
You said you torture the piano?
Yes, I do. Anna, you were able to do something really extraordinary in your piece.
Oh.
And that is, you had 3 timelines going on at the same time. You had the group going on, you had her thoughts going on in the present time, and then you were able to actually render an entire scene that happened in the past. So I'm going to ask you, like, how difficult was that to actually pull off with the aplomb that you did it, because you have those 3 timelines going on at the same time?
That's a good question. I've always written, I've so often written things that move through time. So it's always felt like a pretty, I don't want to say natural because that sounds snotty, but it's always felt pretty natural for me to move like that, because I think I can only speak for my own brain, but I think this is true for a lot of people. That's what I do all day long. I'm in the present moment, but I'm always thinking about the meaning and something that's happened in the past. And that's gotten especially true as I've gotten older. I'm 54 now, which is, whatever. It's not old, but it feels kind of old. And then, it was just, I wrote the novel. I want to say I started the novel in like 2013, and I wrote it on and off for 7 years, and then finally finished it with a wonderful group of support in I think about 2020, 2021. So the novel's been through, draft after draft after draft after draft. Just, I think, hundreds of revisions, which isn't really, that's not that unusual, but to really get that, that move into and out of without breaking a section and putting the time period at the top, which I often try to avoid doing that. I'm not really sure why. Despite my comfort with it, it's just a question of lots and lots of revising and rereading and reading and watching other people do it, watching other writers do it, kind of soaking it all in.
Well, that was a really deft way of moving, because all 3 of those storylines had a present action, a present or forward movement. So that was really a really hard thing to pull off at the same time.
Thank you.
So I want to ask each of you, and whoever, I guess we could go in alphabetical order. What brings you to the writing life? Do you write every day? Do you keep a journal? What is your what is your discipline or process? And I guess we could start with John, because I actually have your novel. I haven't read it yet, but I do have that novel. So you said you also do journalism. So what is it like? What inspired you to form words into essays and journalism and novels and poetry? When did you know you wanted to be a writer? What was your inspiration?
I don't know what my inspiration was, but I remember when I was in the 4th grade, we had on Friday in the mid-morning, we had creative writing. And there's one day I woke up, I had a fever, I woke up sick. It was Friday. And at some point I realized, oh, if I don't go to school, I'm going to miss creative writing. And so I tried to convince my parents that I didn't have a fever and I wanted to go to school. So I've always enjoyed writing. And at some point I had this idea that I had to write one form. And at some point I let go of that and realized, like, I can write whatever form I want to write. And now I feel like it's a good story is a good story. And I just want to tell a good story. And sometimes it's there. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh, I could have done better. But I do journal. I journal every day, first thing in the morning. And I'm currently freelancing. And so I also schedule 2 half days during the week. This is new, but I block off 2 half days during the week as a meeting for purposes of writing. And so far, I've been doing it for about a month. So far, I'm keeping to it, but talk to me in another 6 months and see if I'm still there.
You actually phased out a little bit. You just said this is new, and you started doing something twice a week. So what is it? You
I
faded
blocked
out
off
a little.
a block of hours where I write, not work-related writing, but like
Okay.
if it's research for a journalism piece, if it's working on a screenplay, if I'm working on another novel. And so
That's a great way to do it. Daniel?
All right. So it was the summer of 1953. I was in 2nd grade, and they're like, you can write poems for the fall school, whatever. Just write about the seasons. And I was like, wait, we can write these things? And I wrote them, and they got put in, like, the school-wide journal thing. So I was published in 2nd grade, went on a massive hiatus for about, another 5 or 6 decades. So my writing process now, like, when do I find time to write? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm in one of those weird, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like with promotion for this thing that's coming out on December 10th this year from Unsolicited Press. That's unsolicitedpress.com / Daniel DiFranco. I don't know. I'm amazed that I've written anything. I'm just one of those, I think writers that are listening, you probably have fallen into those slumps as well. I need to do what John's doing. I need to put it on the calendar. That way I can fail myself, like, internally, but then I have, like, the proof that I didn't do it either. So I think I need a calendar. Thanks, John.
And Anna?
So I'm currently revising my 2nd novel, and it is really like pulling teeth. It's just a long haul right now. So I'm definitely in a force yourself to go out there and get this done. So it's just excruciating, actually, right now, to be doing what I'm doing. And I even see, like, what I'm working on has its moments that are working, and then some of it isn't. And it's a haul right now. So I really hope this is just an extended phase, because when I wrote the first draft, I had a really good time. So anyway, and this is really unusual for me too, because I love revision. Like, it's the best part. for me that it's the best part of writing. But I don't know, not this time. So I'm just trying to work against a lot, which I think is a really common experience. I hope it's a common experience for writers. So I figured I would just.
I hear a lot of writers going through that now these days. Yeah, many of my friends were telling me that they find themselves in a slump these days. Yeah. Except for John, who's got the whole calendar thing down. So we have to take a lesson from John with the calendar. So in our final question is what, just a short answer, what do you want to tell aspiring writers out there? And I guess we'll go from Daniel to John and to Anna. You know, one message to aspiring writers.
Come here, inspiring writers. Just keep going. Put that ass in the chair.
Yeah.
John, what do you want to tell aspiring writers?
Don't stop.
I'm going to tell aspiring writers to listen to Daniel and John, and also to read and read and read some more. Read outside your favorite genre a lot. Like, just read it all. Just read, learn from that. So yeah, it really is a joy. I promise. Just not
very wise word. Yeah. I want to thank you all for sharing your wonderful work with us. I want to thank everyone who is watching for joining us this evening for Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. The books of these authors are available at unsolicitedpress.com, and I actually put a link in the comment section. Please join us again in 2 weeks at the same time, 8:30 Eastern Time and 5:30 Pacific Time for our next edition of Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press, and that is actually August 21st. So thank you all, and good night.
Thank you so much. It was great to hear your work, Daniel and John. Thanks, Rosalia.